The first sitting of the 7th Parliament of South Africa is currently underway. It is a historic occasion as the ruling African National Congress lost its parliamentary majority. The ANC and the Democratic Alliance have signed an agreement to work together in a government of national unity. Let's unpack all of this with political analyst Thobani Zikalala. Bob Zikalala, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Let us greet you and greet your viewers. Thank you for having us.
It's an absolute pleasure. So quite an eventful day, a historic day in South Africa's democracy. And of course, the GNU between the ANC, the DA, the IFP and other smaller parties being made official today. What's your take on the secrecy behind the talks that took place over the last 14 days? Could the voters not have been brought into confidence along the way in terms of the developments of these discussions? What's that going to do in terms of the trust deficit between the electorate in terms of what their wishes were and what we are now seeing playing out in Parliament?
If I get you correctly, I would say, the nature of coalition talks, in South Africa in the past has always been marked with, of course, secrecy, things being done behind closed doors. But with the idea of how this announcement of a government of national unity, which of course, for some of us is just a multi-party coalition, is that, of course, at some point there should have been at least a point where the parties that form this part of this government of national unity were able to put forward, some sort of a way of trying to bring the nation into confidence, and also an articulation of what their program of action and what are the modalities of how this government of national unity is going to work. We hope with the election of presiding officers and, of course, subsequently with the election of the president in a few minutes from now, that after that the president will, the elected president and the parties to the government of national unity will be able to bring in the nation into confidence in terms of an articulation of a program of action on the modalities of this agreement that they have and how it's going to work and how the checks and balances within it are going to work. Because if you have got so many parties, and of course you've got opposition parties that have been there for some time, like your Democratic Alliance and this type of government national unity, we need to one way or another find a way of how this is going to work. And of course, also, if you look at the different constituencies that these political parties represent, I think in one way or another, they need to be appraised on how this government of national unity serves their interests as different constituencies, because you will understand that the nuances of how this coalition comes about, the DA, the Freedom Front Plus, the ANC, and all these different political parties have got different constituencies, who've got different expectations from government, and they've got different interests. They need to find a way where there's an expression of how the different interest of these different political constituencies and electorate are able to find expression in this new government, and of course in the program of action, or the program that unites these political parties, how they're going to be articulated in that. Because if that doesn't happen, then almost it seems like an elite pact between the political elite, which really does not give expression to what the ordinary man on the street is, how is going to be served by such a coalition.
And of course, the pressure of ensuring that this is constituted within 14 days. In future, in terms of our constitution, would it be advisable for there to be sort of an extension of this time? Because, we heard with the DA's leader saying a lot of the agreements were just based on principle. And of course, like you say, the ideologies between these parties are quite often quite far apart. So for them to be able to find each other without negotiating based on positions surely should take a bit of more time.
Of course, I think some of the provisions of our constitution, I think they were almost written with the idea that the transition between different administrations will always be quicker, will be less complicated. But as our democracy grows older, we are now we now find ourselves in a position where coalitions are much more possible than they've ever been since our beginning of our democracy. That means that there's some provisions in the constitution must be changed. 14 days to form a government, to find each other ideologically, to find a program of action, and to be able to appraise your electorate in itself, and to seek a fresh mandate from the electorate in terms of how things must work in itself, needs much more time than just 14 days. I believe that going forward, we need to find a a way that says we can't press politicians into an agreement, because what then happens is what maybe has happened with this coalition is an elite pact, and then most of the conversations is about whether or not they agree in terms of position sharing and responsibilities. But there's no real thrashing out of the different modalities, the issues of ideological differences, and of course the differences in terms of the constituencies that are being served and how the interests of those constituencies are served, and how you then find an expression of finding a fresh mandate from your constituency, because there's no political party that goes to campaign and on the basis that they are going to form a coalition most of the time. All of them campaign on the basis of victory. When they don't find victory, they must be able to go back to their constituency in one way or another to find a fresh mandate in terms of which political parties they will be able to work with. And unfortunately, this doesn't happen. I mean, the ordinary man on the street is almost left out when the election day is over. It then becomes an elite pact that they're never a part of. This is why you've had different reactions in terms of this government of national unity, because the electorate, the ones who carry the mandate, are now in a position where their mandate may be used or misused in different ways without finding a way of being able to have input on how those things work.
Julius Malema spoke earlier on, I think it was yesterday, when he spoke about, in principle, the party with the most votes should be the one to elect a president or to lead. And he was making specifically reference to the KZN region, where the MK party had received a 45%. Based on that principle, why do you think you would then accept nomination for going against the president tonight?
Of course, I mean, initially, Julius Malema, I think, wasn't correct when he says, in most cases, the party that carries the most votes with us, they then have a bigger mandate. I mean, from the electorate, they are much more bigger support from the electorate. They must be in a position to lead any coalition governments. But of course, we know in South Africa things have happened differently in many situations where you have found, I mean, like in the case in KwaZulu-Natal, you find majority parties being voted out by opposition and things like that. I mean, Julius Malema, I think, in one way or another, accepts the nomination and contests the position of president, even though he knows maybe in terms of votes he may not win, but contests it on principle. I mean, sometimes politicians and people who contest positions can contest on the basis of trying to prove a point that they do not agree with what is happening. Therefore, they want, of course, maybe the idea of history will absolve us, to be recorded in history, that they stood against this particular arrangement. I mean, just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, Julius Malema was in a position of saying if the ANC is willing to support them for the speaker position with their national chairperson, Veronica Mente, they are willing to vote for willing to vote for the ANC. It seems as if that agreement maybe was not able to be reached, and therefore, on principle, they contest on the basis that they don't support the government of national unity. Whether or not that contestation yields results in terms of success, I mean, they believe that it's a secondary issue. The first issue is on the basis of that, whether or not you agree with the position being put forward. If you don't agree, on principle, you must be seen in history to have contested it to show that you didn't agree. I mean, of course, for some people, it may be viewed as a futile exercise. But as I say, many politicians, and I think maybe Julius Malema is operating on that principle of history absolving him, that when the government of national unity between the DA and the ANC and other political parties was presented, which they didn't agree with, especially on the basis that it includes parties like the DA and the Freedom Front Plus, they stood in opposition. It's the same thing, I think, that happened with Vuyo Zungula's contestation of the deputy speaker position and Veronica Mente's contestation of the speaker position. The contestation of principle by the Progressive Caucus on the basis that, one, they were excluded, two, they don't agree with how this government of national unity is being formed. Therefore, they want to stand in history to say they oppose this government of national unity. As I say, it may not yield any result, but maybe for them, what they want to make is a symbolic point about all of the going-ons of today.
Speaking about making symbolic points, I mean, we saw the IFP candidate, Thami Ntuli, now taking the reins in the province of KwaZulu-Natal as premier. If we look at the composition of the GNU in that province, I mean, the province of KZN has specifically put out a call to the ANC to say to them, you have not served us well and we want differently. But for the ANC to not go again with that principle of the MK party, party who have a 45% within that province. Would this not have been an opportunity for them to sit back, recalibrate as a party, look within themselves, and possibly in the next election be able to emerge victorious once again?
I think it would have been an opportunity for the ANC to sit in the backbenches as an opposition, because about 80% of the electorate in KwaZulu-Natal rejected them and put them in the opposition benches. But of course, also it seems as if the arrangements at national gave the ANC leverage to be able to negotiate at a provincial sphere. And of course, the idea that even from the beginning there were mutings around the exclusion of the MK party. I mean, it is the ANC who could have been in a position to be able to introspect, to be able to renew themselves, and to be able to present themselves again to the electorate